So right now, I'm very excited to have back on the show this American journalist. He's a media critic. He's the author of a book called War Made Easy: How Presidents and Pundits Keep Spinning Us to Death. It was published in 2005. They also made a movie about it. That's right, a documentary based on War Made Easy was released in 2007. Is Norman Solomon here with us? He's here. Norman, are you there? Can I hear you?
Hi.
Oh, hi.
Howdy.
Oh, fantastic. Good to see you again. Thanks so much for making the time to talk to us. Now, you recently wrote an article in Truthdig about a couple of stories the New York Times have done. And first of all, before we get into that, could you just give me an overall, so in 2001, 2002, 2003, we ran the mainstream press really beat the drum for war. And they got us into, and I'm talking the Washington Post, I'm talking the New York Times, CNN, of course. Television journalism is horrible, but even our, papers of note, the Washington Post and the New York Times, were 100% for the war. They wrote 24 pro-war articles in the Washington Post. Do you see any kind of parallels, what's happening right now with the mainstream news media running with this Russia narrative?
Well, there's a tremendous amount of enthusiasm for, hey, you've got to spend a lot on the military contracting. You've got to have some big enemies to justify having a huge military budget. Yeah, it wasn't just, as you say, Fox News. It was not even New York Times and Washington Post, but especially the New York Times and Washington Post, because they helped set the agenda. And let's not leave out All Things Considered and Morning Edition on NPR, PBS NewsHour, and a lot of those same entities are really pushing now for how bad the Russians are and they're a threat to democracy, as though what happened on November 8th was really the fault of the Kremlin. It didn't have a lot to do with racism or structural injustice or making it harder for poor people to vote or purging hundreds of thousands of people from the voting rolls. No, it's all Vladimir Putin's fault. And you can see how convenient that is, and it also revs up the war machine.
Yeah. So, are you concerned about what's in it for the Washington Post and the New York Times to keep doing this? Is it now? Yeah. When people ask me
for them, well, for starters, Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. As we know, he's about the richest person in the world, as the owner of Amazon, who also has just bought Whole Foods. I mean, this is all about a tremendous corporate investment in the military-industrial intelligence complex. Let's not forget that Amazon Web Services, owned by Jeff Bezos, signed a $600 million contract with the CIA for keeping that agency's info in its cloud. And Bezos said they're just getting started. Historically, the New York Times as well, look, they do some great journalism. They also have beat the drums for many, many wars, including the Vietnam War, the invasion of Iraq. They told us that Colin Powell at the UN at February 5th, 2003 was so impressive and laid aside a lot of doubts about the invasion. So this is in a historical context. And when you look at the Russians, you look at a tremendous psychological and political investment from the Clinton wing of the Democratic Party to say, oh, yeah, it's the Russians' fault that we lost. And in fact, if you look at the book Shattered, which came out a few weeks ago, written by two embedded journalists who followed the Clinton campaign, about 24 hours after that horrible election result last November, at the National Clinton headquarters, among some boxes where they brought in some pizza at their headquarters in Brooklyn, they decided, the book tells us, to blame Russia for the election result. So, hey, what's to lose? Plus, it gets the Bernie wing of the party off this topic. It's so annoying when people talk about Wall Street, when people talk about how the Clinton wing of the party is enmeshed with the big banks and the profiteers and the billionaires. So, hey, changing the subject has been very useful for a lot of forces. Let's talk about Russia, Russia, Russia.
So Norman, let me ask you. So exactly how does it work? I saw Phil Donahue recently. He was asked, did he think that the head of General Electric was calling the MSNBC during the war because Phil Donahue got fired because he was anti-Iraq war. And they asked him, do you think that the head of General Electric was talking to the head of MSNBC and telling them things? And he said yes. So what?
Well, there's a memo. Fortunately, there was a leak of a memo from MSNBC before the war began. We don't want to have Phil Donahue on with these anti-war guests when the flag is going up. So we have a smoking gun memo, and this is about commercial interest. This is about trying to identify as network executives and as network programmers with the war makers, particularly in time of war. There's a shocking sort of hyperbole coming out of many members of Congress, many Democrats, including Jackie Speer, who's a good congressperson generally from Silicon Valley, just about a day ago said that what the Russians did was, quote, an act of war. Can you get a grip on that? I mean, it is so insane and dangerous. Here we have two countries with 93% of the world's nuclear weapons between them. As you mentioned a few minutes ago, just in the last couple of days, you've got Russian and U.S. jets flying within a few feet of each other. And are we supposed to gamble the future of humanity of a nuclear holocaust? Because just like CEOs who think about the next couple of quarters, you've got these brilliant tacticians like Nancy Pelosi and the head of the DNC now, Tom Perez, thinking that it's a smart thing to run against Russia. Now, if you're in Wisconsin or Western Pennsylvania or Ohio, do you wake up in the morning and you're thinking about, oh, the Kremlin's really causing me a problem? Or do you think about health care for your family, education for your kids? This is an attempt to replicate exactly the mistakes that Hillary Clinton made when she ran against Putin last summer and fall, and you can see what good it did her.
Hey, if you enjoyed this clip of Aggressive Progressive, why not become a member of the TYT network and you can watch the whole hour. We do a show every Thursday, and then you can watch it live when it happens as a member, or you can watch it later at your convenience because you get access to the podcast of Aggressive Progressive and other ways to get a hold of it. There's lots of stuff. Come become a member at tytnetwork.com/join.